Not where you're throwing the nuts.
The brain is a wonderful instrument. It can take in any number of pieces of information all at once.
Can it also convince you that things happened in an order different from the one in which they actually happened?
She tripped before I threw the nuts.
If Felicity Carline tripped before you threw the nuts, how could you possibly have expected her to catch them? I repeat the question. If Felicity
Everything
Carline
happened
fell...
in a split second. I threw the nuts in the same split second that she tripped and had her accident.
You knew Felicity Carline was overladen, and yet you chose to throw the nuts rather than give them to her.
Yes.
Why couldn't you just have given them to her, Mrs. Carline?
She'd have ignored me.
Isn't that rather a supposition on your part?
She wouldn't take the coupons from me when I tried to give them to her. I knew the way she felt about me. I knew she wouldn't take them from me.
So you threw them?
Yes.
You must have thrown them with considerable velocity.
Well, I don't know how fast I threw them.
Well, over a distance of 10 feet, that's irrelevant, except to say they must have impacted with considerable force. Am I not right?
Yes.
Causing Felicity Carline to lose her footing.
That isn't what happened.
I put it to you that you did indeed intend some harm to Felicity, though nothing like the harm she actually suffered.
I didn't.
I'd suggest, moreover, that you are now ashamed and frightened by the actual results of your actions.
It isn't true at all. I threw them to her because I wanted her to take them with her.
What did you do after Felicity Carline had fallen?
I went outside. I had to get out.
To run away from what you had done?
I knew I was going to be sick.
Why were you going to be sick?
There was blood everywhere. It was horrible.
Were you sick?
Yes, several times.
And then you went home?
Yes.
You didn't go back into the shop to see if there was anything you could do to help?
There'd been an accident. It was nothing to do with me.
You knew the woman who was injured?
I'd been sick all down my dress. I had to go home.
And when you got home?
I got changed.
And then?
I had a drink.
The sherry you bought in the Vin Ordinaire?
No, I'd left that behind. I had whiskey. I had it neat. It was all there was in the house. I had to have something.
What happened when the police officer arrived at your house?
I thought someone had died or something.
You are a keen cricketer, are you not?
Yes.
What position do you usually play?
Third man. I mean, woman.
Does this position require accurate throwing?
Mr. Fletcher Reed, could you please explain to the court the term third man?
Your Honour, he is a fielder on the boundary. It's vital that he, or in this case, she, throws as accurately as possible to prevent extra runs being scored.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher Reed.
How good is your aim, Mrs. Carline?
Well, it's pretty good.
And when you threw the nuts so that Felicity Carline could catch them, were they accurately aimed?
Yes.
Felicity Carline says that the nuts struck her on the head. How do you account for that?
She fell just as I threw the nuts. The packet must have hit her as she was falling.
As she was falling, Mrs. Carline?
Yes. She must have fallen across the path of the nuts just as they reached her.
Did you see the packet hit Felicity Carline?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
I was looking at her feet.
You say you almost tripped over a stand as you entered the Vin Ordinaire.
Yes, I only saw it just in time.
And what was your opinion of the layout of the Vin Ordinaire on the night in question?
I don't know how they got away with it. We'd never be allowed to one of Andrew's shops.
Got away with what, Mrs. Carline?
The layout of the shop as it was on the 17th of March.
Are there severe penalties for disregarding the rules about layout?
It has to be safe. If it was proved that your own negligence in setting out the shop had caused someone's injury, well, you could find yourself facing huge claims for damages.
So if you had fallen as you entered the Vin Ordinaire and had been injured, you could have claimed for damages?
Yes.
And the same would apply to anyone else injured in the shop?
Most certainly.
And where would the money for these damages come from?
Well, there'd be insurance, of course, but if the shopkeeper had been negligent, well, it could bankrupt a small shop.
Like the Vin Ordinaire?
Yes.
Mrs. Carline, after you left the Vin Ordinaire, you went home?
After a bit. I was very sick first.
But you did go home without offering to help Felicity Carline?
The sight of blood always makes me sick. I thought I'd better go home. There was enough chaos without my fainting or something.
You've been sick on your dress?
Yes, the dress is ruined. The cleaners couldn't get the stains off.
And at home you had a stiff drink?
Yes, I felt faint. Terribly faint. I've always been like that about blood.
Why, Mrs. Carline?
I saw my mother die of a hemorrhage when I was 15.
I have no further questions, Your Honour. You are Matthew Woodman of 11 Pottery Terrace, Fulchester?
Yeah.
Are you working, Mr. Woodman?
Mr. Woodman, everyone calls me Matt.
Not in a court of law, Mr. Woodman.
Oh.
Are you working?
What do you think?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you the question.
No, I'm not working.
Did you, on the 17th of March this year, visit the Van Ordinaire? It's an off-licence on Claremont Crescent in Fulchester.
Yeah.
And while you were in the Van Ordinaire, did someone come in who you knew?
This lady came in.
Which lady?
The one who's married to the bloke I do my paper round for.
So you recognise the woman who entered the shop?
Yeah, she didn't recognise me, though.
Did you know the name of the woman who came in?
No.
You didn't know her name even though you'd worked for her husband?
Former husband, if you please, Miss Fletcher Reed.
I'm sorry, Your Honour. You didn't know her name even though you'd worked for her former husband?
Yeah, I remember what we called her now. Fliss the Priss. Prissy. You know, Mrs. Carline.
Did she recognise you?
She never knew who I was.
Did anyone else come into the shop while you were trying to make up your mind which beverage to buy?
Yeah, Miss Vincent. That one. That's Miss Vincent. Well, she used to be anyway.
And how do you know Miss Vincent, who is now Mrs. Carline?
I was in her form at school. She was great. I got a CSE in chemistry because I used to like her classes. She made them really interesting.
Did Mrs. Carline say anything to you? Well?
Sorry, miss, I've got in a muddle. I don't know which one he's talking
Miss
about.
Fletcher Reed, I think that it would help all of us if you could make it clear to which Mrs. Carline you are referring.
Tom.
Yes, yes. Did Mrs. Paula Carline, the former Miss Vincent, say anything to you when she entered the shop?
No, she didn't hardly look at me. I was going to ask her, since it was my birthday at the time, if she fancied a drink. And I thought she might say something about, you know, the hair.
Yes. So, Mrs. Paula Carline hardly looked at you, then what did she do?
Well, she got a bottle of sherry off the shelf. I didn't know how she could, not sherry. Well, then she went to pay for it, and the other one, Felicity, right?
Yes.
Well, she just looks at her, like, really spiteful, like this. Right? Well, then she went to the door and she left her nuts on the table.
Who left them?
The Felicity one. And then Paula, she picks them up and she shouts, "Here!" But Felicity, she took no notice, and right at that moment, she tripped over this stand thing, which was right by me. And at the same moment, Paula lobbed the nuts for her to catch.
Right at the same moment?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was just like in the films. It made a really good film, actually, especially in slow motion. Well, the next thing is blood and glass and everything everywhere, and she's lying on the floor and there's blood pouring out of her head. It was amazing. It was just like something on the TV. It was really amazing.
Would you like to sit down, Mr. Woodman?
No, thanks all the same. Well, as I was saying, it was really amazing. It made me feel a bit sick. It made Paula feel sick and all. You should have seen her. She was sick as a dog, all down herself.
You saw Paula Carline being sick?
Yeah. I'd never seen a lady being sick in the street before.
Mr. Woodman, we have heard your eloquent description of what happened in the Vin Ordinaire on the 17th of March, but there are a few points that I should like to clarify for the court. You say that you heard Paula Carline shout, "Here," before she threw the nuts.
Yeah.
You're quite sure that's what you heard?
What else would she have said? She always said what she meant. That's why she was so good at school. You always knew where you were with her.
You aren't perhaps only thinking she shouted "here" because your sympathies lie with her.
Look, she was the only teacher I ever liked at school. Look, she wouldn't do what you said she's done. She just wouldn't do it. She never even threw board rubbers.
Are you sure that your CSE in chemistry does not prejudice you in her favour?
Why should I be prejudiced? What's the point of a CSE, eh?
Members of the jury, you are here to decide whether Paula Carline is innocent or guilty of maliciously wounding Felicity Carline. Malice is defined as active ill will or hatred. There are 4 points to consider in deciding whether Paula Carline threw the packet of peanuts at Felicity Carline out of malice. First, did she shout here, as one would when expecting someone to catch something, or there, as one would before throwing an object in anger? Secondly, could Paula Carline seriously have expected Felicity Carline to catch the nuts? Surely it was obvious to her that it was impossible to catch them, however accurately they may have been thrown, and that an accident would very likely result. Thirdly, if Paula Carline threw the packet of peanuts at Felicity Carline out of sheer kindness, as she said she did, would she then walk straight out of the shop without attempting to help Felicity? Even if she was sick outside, wouldn't she have come back to see if there was anything she could do to help? Finally, is Matthew Woodman's evidence reliable? We heard him say it was just like watching something on the television. I would put it to you that in his rerun of events for this court, he may have made things more dramatic and simultaneous than they were. Members of the jury, after the evidence you have heard, can you have any other conclusion than that Paula Carline threw the packet of peanuts at Felicity Carline out of malice, and the accident was the result of her actions? If this is your conclusion, then you can return no other verdict but guilty. Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you were perhaps, as children, brought up to believe in wicked stepmothers, but you have in front of you today a stepmother who contradicts that myth. A woman who bought a house in order that her husband should be near his children. A woman who was more concerned for the emotional welfare of her stepchildren than for her own convenience. I ask you, is it likely that she would assault their mother, knowing the distress that this would cause to her stepchildren? Counsel for the prosecution has pointed out that Paula Carline left the Van Ordinaire without stopping to assist Felicity Carline. But would Paula Carline's being sick or fainting have only added to her distress? Wasn't my client's action the most appropriate one that she could have taken in the circumstances? She admits to throwing a packet of peanuts, but surely, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you cannot accept that she threw them with malice. If Paula Carline threw the packet of peanuts with malice, would she have left the shop in such a state of shock? I think you will all appreciate how upset my client was on the occasion of their meeting in the Loderia shoe shop. She had just found out that she was not expecting a longed-for baby, and I therefore venture to suggest that those events are in no way connected with the events before or after. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I put it to you that, taking in consideration the evidence that has been placed before you in this court, your verdict can only be not guilty. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been listening over the last few days to a case which is full of emotional overtones. It is now your duty to pass judgment on Paula Carline, not on any emotional grounds, but on the evidence as it has been presented to you in this court. That Paula Carline entered the Van Ordinaire on March the 17th is not disputed, nor is the fact that Felicity Carline sustained serious and terrible injuries. Nor is the fact that Paula Carline threw a packet of peanuts. What is in dispute is the connection. What is in dispute is the connection between the throwing of the peanuts and the accident which occurred. Felicity Carline and Eunice Gilbert have stated that the accident happened as a result of the nuts being thrown. Paula Carline and Matthew Woodman insist that Felicity Carline tripped before the peanuts were thrown. As the judges in this case, it is your duty to decide with whose evidence you agree. If you are certain that Paula Carline threw the nuts with malice and that Felicity Carline's injuries happened as a result of this action, then your verdict must be guilty. If you are uncertain on these 2 points, or indeed, if you agree that Felicity Carline tripped before the nuts were thrown, then her injuries are indeed the result of an unfortunate accident, and you must find Paula Carline not guilty. Will you now retire and consider your verdict?
All stand.
The defendant will stand. Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Have we reached a verdict upon which you are all agreed?
We have.
Do you find the defendant, Paula Carline, guilty or not guilty of the charge of maliciously wounding Felicity Carline?
Guilty.
Is this the verdict of you all?
It is.
Paula Carline was placed on probation for a period of 2 years. Felicity Carline is to bring a case of damages against her in the civil court.